Our next guest is Cristina Fernandez, and I'm going to read Cristina's bio that we have here for everyone who may not know her. Cristina is a wife and mother of two. She's a healthcare professional and business owner. She was a trustee candidate in the Waterloo Region in the last municipal elections, getting tremendous support from the community, and hasn't stopped raising awareness about the current state of our school boards. She's been taking action by delegating to school board, initiating writing and freedom of information campaigns, speaking to the public, organizing protests, and helping mobilize citizens to do the same thing while working on solutions to our publicly funded school systems. She's a leader of a local parent group called EMPOWR, Educating Minds, Parents of Waterloo Region, a unity of discerning individuals standing up for our children, their education, and for the liberty of all people. Christina's been involved in a ton of different stuff. Please tell me, Cristina, that you can activate your video.
I am here.
Yay! I'm so glad to see your smiling face. I apologize to everybody once again for the settings in the last two presenters. And I'm very glad that Cristina is able to join us today. Cristina, I'm going to give you the floor. Do you need to share the screen?
I will eventually. I just checked this out now and it says that it's disabled for participant screening,
Okay.
screen sharing. So I don't know if you can change that.
Do you need to
I don't
have
need it
any
right away.
do you need to have any sound?
No, just no, I don't think so. Just,
Okay. You should have privileges now, and I'm going to give you the
yep.
floor.
Okay.
Great to see you again. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, thank you so much for it. It's always an honor. Thank you. There's so much. It's always an honor to work with alongside all of you. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just cognizant of the time. I know that we're over, but I might need my 30 minutes. So things are going to be just like really practical. There's a few things I wanted to hit on today. To speak to those primarily who want to be doing something but aren't sure what they could be doing. And I know that we all hear this quite a bit, those of us who have been doing quite a bit of work in this area. And to those who are taking action but maybe navigating where to place their time and effort, maybe reevaluating where to place that time and effort. I know a lot of us have been doing that in this new school year. And for those of us maybe who have been taking a lot of action, but some good reminders maybe for us, including myself. So ultimately, by the end of this, my hope is that people are excited to get moving, that they start knowing with confidence that acting in their good conscience is always going to be the path that's best for them and best for their families, regardless. And that's not for me to judge. So I want people to understand that. But regardless of maybe potential hardships or challenges or fears that they might have in doing so, I can promise that, that when we're not going against our conscience and we're coming from a place of discernment, of course, and that's usually the tricky part, but that it will be the best path and possibly the only path for true contentment. So it's a very simple, it may seem like a very simple topic, but I think it's a very critical one for our times, especially with, number one, well, many people are still not aware of what's going on. And I do think that this may come from a place of not wanting to know sometimes, not always, but there's a lot of information, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of polarity happening, and some people just don't really want to get into it. And, I think of just human nature. We do want to proceed in a path of least resistance. We are comfortable. We want to be comfortable. And and also for people who wholeheartedly believe that they don't have either the capacity to deal with a serious issue coming into their schools and to their children's schools. It's kind of like see no evil, hear no evil. Everything's fine kind of coping mechanism, maybe. Not a psychologist, so I won't go there, but I do think these are real, and we need to deal with them as leaders in this movement, as people who want to invoke change, and people who want to just, make some change. And that these are the conversations that we're having within our leadership groups as well, that like, how do we kind of break through these barriers of people kind of being complacent or not seeming to be interested in taking any action. And so again, like, is it a coping mechanism? Is it simply one of those things that seems futile? And I think that's reasonable. That's very reasonable, right? To surrender, to accept the things we cannot change. We're actually supposed to be doing that. So if you legitimately believe that your actions won't amount to anything, then people aren't going to take action, right? And so then when we think of this more deeply, and I think, of all the people who are taking action, does that mean that we tend to be the people who have the courage to change the things we can? Maybe, but I do wonder if maybe we need to be honing in on that wisdom to know the difference and to be honest with ourselves, okay? Particularly when and now I'm talking to a specific group of people who have an urge or a desire, like they do have a pull to do something, but they're not. They know they ought to, but they don't. I'm not talking about everybody, and this isn't judgment again. But to really listen to the stories that maybe we're telling ourselves sometimes. Is it because we can't change it? And so we're surrendering to that? Or is it that we may not be able to change it unless we change ourselves or maybe our circumstances? Maybe something will look different, feel different. Maybe work might be different. Maybe we fear something will change, or will lack if we do something. And so just a little tip for just a little point of wisdom, a little word of wisdom, I'd say is usually if the voice that we're hearing is coming from a place of fear or lack, it's often not the voice that holds the answers for us. Appreciating, the seriousness, like just listening to our last speakers, this is serious stuff. And knowing the urgency, these things can exist without fear. They can exist in the absence of fear. And sometimes fear is what gets people moving. And so if it can get people moving, I think that's okay. But often I'm seeing, and it's another area where we wonder kind of, especially in the leadership, in the work that we're doing, is that can we be cognizant of the fact that when we come out and we do these things, we do appear to be fearless to some people. And for those who do feel that fear, it's real to them, and it may discourage those from taking action. And so this was a really deep conversation that we were having over here in terms of, maybe if we could be cognizant of this, and maybe we can start changing some minds, some hearts, knowing this, being cognizant and intentional about it, that if we came from a place, well, firstly, I think it is because we come from a place of trust. Because whether, I don't know that it has to do with whether we're fearless or not. I think it has to do with doing it anyway and coming from a place of trust, of knowing that regardless how gross it can get, and it does get really gross, knowing how sad it can be, which we just heard how sad it can be. That's just a fraction of it, right? Like that's just scratching the surface of it. Knowing how frustrating it can become, we know that, and whether this confidence is coming within us or for those of us who believe it, we're gaining it from God, whatever it is, it's a trust that things will work out and things are unfolding the way they're supposed to, regardless of the process or the outcomes that we're getting right away. That it's a process that needs to be done, and we do it because we need to do it. So I wonder if we could be able to be intentional as leaders, for those who are already taking action, and maybe this is really the only way we get for that part, but out of this presentation is that we can be, maybe if we're a little bit more intentional with the truth, when we shed light on the truth, yes, it's not about softening the truth. It's not about making it easier to swallow. That's not what this is about. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, can we offer the truth and shed light on the truth, as hard as the truth is, but always with a level or this energy of that hope or trust that hey, we're going to get through this. And do you want to help us get through this and work through this? Because the only way out is through. And just maybe that might change the way that, because we have been doing this for a while, and I think that we're all having kind of these conversations. How do we break these strongholds? And maybe that's part of it, is that people need to understand that everything they do does not go void. And there's so many different things that you can be doing. But ultimately, if you're not doing what you know to be right, there's going to cause some conflict. So let's go right into this. I have a very simple infographic that let me see if I can share this properly. Can you see it? Uh-oh, I don't have any indication. I see myself on the screen, so I don't know if you're seeing it. Shannon, can you let me know if you can see this?
Yes, we have it.
Do you see just the infographic?
I see a shared screen, a PDF.
Okay, action. That's right for you and your family.
That's right.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. So very simplistic. Okay. The first and foremost, I think that people really need to do with we've got lots of propaganda happening. We've got a lot of things coming our way. It's to figure out what your values are without all the noise, and to know that you are aligning, that the behaviors and the actions that you take, are they aligning with that? Something that's huge, and I think that maybe people can relate a little bit more to this, like as a health standard, is that whenever we have people who have their true north, or their moral compass, or whatever they believe to be true, let's say for health, they need to eat a certain way, or be physically active for a certain amount of hours every day, whatever it is. When they hold true to those values in terms of their mind, they believe these things to be true, but then they're doing something else in a different trajectory. It's not even, obviously, if what they're doing is not serving their body and their well-being, we're going to have dis-ease. But even just the fact that they are disaligning their behavior with their values, that in itself is going to cause tremendous dis-ease. And I do see this in our society today. We've got people who know they ought to be doing something, and they don't because of whatever it is. And that in itself is going to cause dis-ease. We need to get back to our true north, our moral compass. Figure out what that is, though, and what that is for you might not be the same as what it is for me. But what's important is you really figure out what it is that aligns with your values, and then to ask if your action, your behaviors align with those values. Okay. And so once you kind of sit still with that, one of the biggest questions we have in terms of action and what people should or shouldn't do is, should you remain in the publicly funded school system, or should you choose something different? So independent schools, or homeschooling, or home education. And I was very intentional with having this as our first question for this decision map. Because if you already know after being still, regardless of everything else, that the option for you is to take your kids out, I highly recommend that. And again, I say that without judgment, without telling you that that's what you should be doing. I'm not saying that that's right for you. I'm saying when you are still and you figure it out, if that's the pull, I highly encourage it. And I think more often than not, and I'm not talking about what we want. Okay, and that's another thing. I'm not talking about what you want. I'm referring to what you know you ought to do. So more often than not, I think we have individuals that know they ought to take their kids out. Okay. And okay, there are people who believe the publicly funded school system, that we need reform. That's where we need to put our work, and that's it. And they're not even interested in homeschooling or any of that stuff. And that's okay. I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to those people who have a strong pull. They know they ought to take their kids out. Okay. And more often than not, with that group of individuals, it will be, we think of all the reasons why not. And they're obvious and valid, right? Cost. Our careers, we might need to go more part-time, or we need to switch our schedules, or even just the thought of us being the primary educator. Do we feel that we have the capacity or the know-how to do that? All of those things. It's not to say that they're not important things to evaluate. I'm saying that there's a way around that. And if you have a pull, that's probably where you should be. And that's where we should explore a little bit more. Now, the reverse is also true. Okay. And that's where we need, as leaders, also need to remember that there is different circumstances, and not everyone is meant to be doing the same thing. But the reverse is also true, where you might very much want to pull your kids out. And I have a whole bunch of side stories to that, but because of the time, I'll spare you. But it's not a calling right now. So you would prefer to take your kids out, but it's not a calling. And so you have to see that this isn't dictating what is best for you. It's really, and for your family, it's really you figuring out on an individual basis. Okay, so yes, be still. No, if you already know to pull your kids out, do it. And that I don't have a decision map on how to know which area to go, but that's definitely something we can talk a little bit more about at another time. If you're kind of like, I don't know, how am I going to know? Maybe the next question might help you answer that. So number one question is, are your kids' minds safe? Are your kids protected where they are right now? So, and the first question might be, how do you know this, right? The best way to know is to ask the questions. You need to be informed. We need to be informed of where we're putting our kids, period. Hard stop. We live in a time now where we just can't necessarily presume that the government has our best interest, that all of the systems are created with the best options in mind. We have to understand that. And if you think that's some sort of conspiracy, I'm not sure if we can really open those people's eyes at this time. Okay, that's something that is not really it's not really a debate anymore. So year after year, you don't have to do it this way, but an example would be the way we do it is right in the beginning of the year, there's a new teacher, so there's a new interview. So we have questions for them. If there's a new principal coming in, even if it's in the middle of the school year, we have an interview or a meeting with the principal, and we ask questions, right? We set an in-person appointment, so we get to observe the classroom. We would look around. We would have, we'd obviously figure out how things are going with our kids. We see something kind of questionable, a poster, a statement on the wall. We ask the questions. Oh, can you elaborate on what you mean by this? Can you help me comprehend what your message is with this? You see a pride flag. You can say, oh, I noticed that you have a pride flag here. Can you help me understand? Can you give me an overview of how you perceive the pride flag? Or do you make mention of it? Some of them are like, it's just in my classroom. I don't really say anything about it. Okay, well, how do you answer a question? What if you had a question from a student? And we've got all sorts of questions that you can go on. And, I had some people say, if we share this in a public forum, then they're going to know our questions, and then there's going to be a script for them, which actually has happened before. We have had the unions formulate a script on how to answer these questions that these parents are having. And to what I would say to that, you can tell if it's going to be disingenuous if you're getting a script response, or if you're getting a response such as, oh, I'm not going to comment on that. You're going to have to talk to the principal, which is one of the responses they had. I think you're getting enough of your response, right? These open-ended questions, you really get to get a sense for where the teacher lies on their ideologies. And you get to decide, being informed, on whether or not you believe it will be a safe space for your child for this whole school year. Okay. And so that's like, first and foremost, I believe you always have to take care of your family first. You have to figure out if they're going to be fine in the school for that whole year. And if the answer is no, then are you thinking maybe, okay, is switching classrooms an option? Is switching schools what you need to do? If you believe you need to be in the publicly funded school system, or independent schools, or home education or homeschooling an option for you? If the answer is yes, then you might want to go on to the next question is, do you consent? And to me, it's again, in healthcare, being informed if you're not informed, then it isn't consent. And that's where people have to realize when you're seeing signs like kids can't consent to peer, that is truth. If you don't give all of the pros and the cons to something, then the consent is actually void. It doesn't, they haven't been able to consent to it. And the other side of this too is that consent can be withdrawn at any time. So even if all of the pros and cons, or all of the information is given to someone, you can change your mind at any time. So that's another thing that parents, I think, need to realize too in this setting, that you can come back and say, no, I'm not okay with that. And so you can reevaluate that at any time. And so if you do consent, I mean, then that's not really what the summit's for. It's not really what our mission is for. We're not here to convince anyone who is happy with the publicly funded school system to not be happy with it. We're here to shed light on for people who want the information, or people who have no idea what's going on and wouldn't be consenting had they known the information, right? So if the answer is no, and I don't have a line here just because there's so many lines everywhere, but independent school and home education is never off the table. And I was, again, like I said, I was intentional with having that as the first option, because even if your kids are safe in your school, in their classrooms, in their school, if you have a pull to take your kids out, it's so powerful. I mean, I believe this is very deep rooted. And even in, let's say we deal with all the DEI and the SOGI 123 and the sexualization of our kids and all of this stuff, I truly believe, like after all the research that I've done in schools and just in society and homes and families and the breakdown of the family, I do believe that 6 hours, 5 days a week is too much for a kid to be in the school. So that's a whole other thing. So that's another part of your decision. If you're feeling that and that's for you, then do it. And plus, you're voting with your feet, right? And you're putting your money where your mouth is. $13,000 to $14,000 per student will be removed from the education system when we remove that student from the education. Unfortunately, we're still paying into the taxes, which we'll hopefully get to later, which I'm seeing the time. But that's something that's, if they're not going to hold themselves accountable, if the school boards are not going to hold themselves accountable, they can't really do much without the funding, and they will have to be forced to do something. So always, it's not off the table. And another thing to realize is that you can always go back too. If you, again, consent can be changed. So if you're feeling like, no, you know what, let's go back, that's okay. I talk to staff members who talk about culturally, there are families who will remove their kids months at a time to go back to a different country and then come back. It's something that I think we need to realize. Even conversations about, because right now we'll have our kids home at least 1 day a week, so they're not at school for more than 4 days a week. And the amount of families who will say, and you can do that? Yeah, you can do that. During the mandates, every other day they were home. And you get to decide that for you and your family. So I really want to empower people to take that power back, that you get to decide what's best for you and your family. Okay. And so let's work with, and this big line here, this big arrow, is that if you were to switch schools, I should have mentioned that, if you were to switch classrooms or switch schools as an option because your children are not safe, again, that's number one. You must do this again. You must ask the questions again to make sure that they're safe. And I would recommend doing this whole loop until you're at yes. Okay. And so then you're at yes. Do you consent? Yes. Okay, great. Proceed. If not, then we're either doing something within the system or you reevaluating if you need to take your kid out, right? So really quickly, and you've heard all of these before, so I wasn't too concerned about spending my time on the actionables per se. It was more the decision map of what to do, what you should do as a family, whether you're staying staying in, getting out, and what to do to find that out, like to really figure, asking the questions, being accountable to yourselves, your families, and your children, and knowing what the right option is for you. And now, notice here that even if you do pull the kids out from the publicly funded school system, I do often enough hear that, or see, or witness, that once the child is out of the publicly funded school system, it's kind of like I don't have to deal with it anymore, which is to each their own. And again, there's no judgment. But I'm talking to those individuals who still feel they ought to be doing something for the rest of the children, for our society at large. My kids are okay. And so that's something my kids are fine. I am more concerned of what we leave for our children. What is it going to look like in the future if we don't either change the system or find some other parallel system? I myself, I speak for myself. I cannot in my good conscience, even if my kids were completely out of the publicly funded school system, I cannot in my good conscience stop the work we're doing. And so I think that hopefully is a little reminder to some of us to see that, and to remember that there are actions that we can take, even if they seem small. They do not go void. And so let's talk a little bit about that in my 5 minutes that I have remaining. Challenge and voice your concern. So if you're not consenting, you know your kids are safe, but you're not consenting. And again, the consent, if your kids are safe, that's more of a classroom and school issue, right? But if you're not consenting overall to the system, to the ideologies that are being encouraged through the school system, voice those concerns. Make them known. I say address the issues directly with those in the position to affect the change. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the outcome you want. What I'm saying is I'm a big proponent of going to the person or group directly who's in charge. Like if it's something that happened in your class, in the kids' classroom, then go to the teacher. If it's something that happened in the school, go to the principal. I'm not talking about policies of who you need to talk to. I'm talking about just honorable, letting the person who did something or you believe who is in the wrong, giving them the opportunity to make it right. Number one. So that's what I mean by this. But it also means, maybe it could be a conversation. It can be a letter, an email. It could be delegating to the board if it's a board issue and you want the board to know about it. There's many different ways. Discussing with the community. So engaging with parents, like other parents that you don't normally engage with, to get a feel like how are you liking the school year? What are your concerns? You'll be surprised with how many parents are just completely dissatisfied with the school system for whatever reason it happens to be. But this is a way of spreading awareness. It's a way of being able to have other people knowing what's going on. Just trying to find my notes because I'm seeing the time, and I think that, yeah, I had a really good, okay, I won't go into that. Notifying officials of your vote. So what some people don't realize is that, because this is so much more than just voting at, when it's election time and putting your ballot in a box. Yes, that's important. And yes, can a lot of these things be done with if we just had good, honorable people in Parliament, in these elected official seats? Absolutely, I think we could. But that doesn't, and we should keep doing that. We should keep on that for sure. But we also vote every time we don't say anything. So our system is kind of rigged in the way, and I get why, just for efficiency, that if you don't say no, you're actually saying yes by acquiescence. So it's silence is acquiescence. And so yes, I can see why that's effective, like an efficient way of doing things, because if you don't object, then let's just go with it. But then there's a problem there, right? Because people are maxed out, they are at capacity, they can't even fathom having to write a letter or do some of the things that we're doing. And so their vote is yes. But I want people to understand that as much as we like to tell ourselves that we're not feeding this problem because maybe we didn't elect those specific individuals, or we're not condoning or celebrating or voting yes, that you are actually voting yes if you're not saying no. So again, if that's in alignment with your values, that's not for me to judge. But if it's not in alignment with your values, I would suggest you reevaluating that and figuring out what we can do about that. Okay. And so that can be, again, writing letters to the Ministry of Education, your MPPs, your MP, setting up a meeting with them. These are not outlandish things. And you take one step at a time, and it becomes easier. Okay. I'm looking at the time. Don't worry, I'm looking at the time. So seeking information, following the money is a big one, I think, for us right now. People, I think, will be interested to know where their money is going, and where it's not going. And so first, ask for the information. If you can't get it, then a freedom of information is another way to go. Participate in your schools, and even those who are outside of the publicly funded school system, maybe going, running for school board trustee, parent councils, RAPSI, PIC, all of those things are really great ways to get involved. And obviously, if you're outside of the school system, the school board or the parent council won't be something. But anyway, evaluate other school options. So research, consider, maybe even create different school options locally. When you're unifying with other discerning parents and citizens, you can come up with, it doesn't have to be huge events, but small events where you gather people of what do we have available, and where are some gaps that we don't have in our area. Maybe that's an area that you find a passion or proficiency to start creating and filling that gap. And then a big one, which I definitely want to spend just a minute on, is something that we're getting really excited about over here is advocating for the funding to follow the student. And so wherever people are, regardless of their discontentment with the school board, if you believe we're better to have the funding follow the student, then start compiling a list of autographs, those citizens who want to vote for this. And again, I do believe this is going to be huge for this movement, because how are the school boards going to proceed if they don't have the funding to do so? So that's another thing. And I really do recommend people doing, we can go into more detail. I'm really excited about that. So we can go into more detail at some point with that. We're still kind of figuring it out ourselves, but we just really feel that the last few years, we have been very honorable in being transparent and giving these people of authority, the decision makers, to be able to, right the wrongs, or even maybe get to the table and have a conversation, help us comprehend where we're wrong, and maybe we can see it a little differently. And we just find that they're not holding themselves to account. We're now seeing, unfortunately, with our new Minister of Education, we don't see them being held to account through their authorities. So we really need to, we kind of have a duty to leave. I believe that to be true. And yeah. And then for those of you who pray, or those who are willing to pray, there's a lot of power that comes within that too. And, ask for the guidance and make requests of what you want to be seeing happening. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I do believe everybody has the capacity within them, or they have the know-how and the skill set to take the first step, whatever step that happens to be for them. So yeah, sorry it took so long.
That was terrific, Cristina. You guys have made some news this year in Waterloo. I'm going to bring David up while I'm thinking about this,
Mm.
because there have been a lot of people who took their kids out of school, right?
A lot of kids. Yeah, we don't have
Um,
the numbers. We ask for the numbers, so putting an FOI in because we don't seem to be getting the numbers. But yeah, yeah, a lot. And a lot of shifting. Even in my school alone, I know of at least two classrooms that had to split the kids because there wasn't enough enrollment and they had to go into, now they're thinking of, I don't know if you saw in the news, they're looking at three grade splits. So you know how there's like sometimes a split like 2, 3. Hey David, they're doing a 3 grade split. They're saying it's necessary to do that now. So
that's kind of wild. We had a similar thing here in Ottawa. We were short about 1,100 students from what was expected. It was the second year in a row that we were below expectations. And we got note that the Catholic school board enrollment has gone up, but not exactly in the proportionate numbers. So people are becoming more and more aware of this and going through that decision tree, making those evaluations. And, one of the things that I've heard in different contexts, I've heard from people who were educating their kids out of country in places where the school systems are captured, and they have to send their kids, but they also tell their kids, you have to be aware that some of the stuff they're teaching don't reflect their values. They're not true. We don't believe those things, and you just kind of have to nod and go along. And I think there's good signs that the youngest, like the voting age kids, the youngest cohort, are leaning more conservative than ever before. So, there is a degeneration that happens, and I think we're at peak degeneracy. But then there's a response to that, and the response is to go the other way. And um, it takes all different kinds of people, takes all different kinds of forms, um, and there are people who are behind the scenes, like Erin mentioned in her presentation, that lesbians have gone back underground now to stop from being infiltrated. So there's kind of like secret groups of people, but
yeah.
there's also secret groups of people that need to be recognized, groups of doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists, therapists, people whose regulatory bodies won't let them speak out, but they've coalesced underground and have been working diligently for years. Um, so there's all these different roles that people are playing in this pushback, and we can see that we're making progress. We still have a big hill to climb together, but uh, it's appreciated all the work that you're doing, not just leadership in Waterloo Region, but the example that you're setting for other people is powerful.